Good evening, all. This is the LighterSeeker, Michael Smith, and I'm going to be bringing you some information that some people had asked for about Kurt Cobain and some incidences with taxi cabs and different things, and the events surrounding his death and his whereabouts and his travels. So I'm going to go into that a little bit. There are several things in this case that don't really make some sense to me and to Joe the Dark Druid. One of them, for example, when he was found, he had the receipt in his pocket for Stan Baker Sport, where the gun had been purchased for the amount and the date. The 20-gauge shotgun, the Remington, and the serial number 1088925 on 3/30/94 for the amount of $308.37, purchased by Dylan Carlson. But yet in his pocket, when he was found, the receipts were found in one pocket, but in another pocket with more notes and pieces of paper, there were two separate pieces of paper that seemed strange to us. One said Seattle Guns with the address of 145 and Lake City written on it, and the other note was Remington 20-gauge, 2 3/4 shells or shorter, set up for light shot, and the serial number again, 1088925. Now, Mr. Cobain knew where he bought the gun and knew which type shells that the gun took, but yet on 4/2/94 at 07:30 in the morning, a taxi driver picked up a person who he thought did not match with the residents. They drove around looking for a place to buy bullets, but were unable to find one. This comes from a direct reading from the police report found online. The male told the driver that he recently had a burglary and needed to buy bullets. At 08:30 hours, the driver dropped the man off in the area of 145th and Aurora because he said he was hungry and wanted to get something to eat. Now, it's odd only because if it had been Mr. Cobain in the taxi going to buy the shotgun shells that he needed or wanted, he knew where he bought the gun at Stan Baker Sports. Matter of fact, they had to drive by there to get to the area of where they ended up buying the shells that they ultimately bought, the ones that were found on the scene of Mr. Cobain's death that came from Seattle Sports, from Seattle Guns. The receipt from Seattle Guns shows that the shells were bought at 12:02 p.m., which means between 8:30 a.m. and 12:02 p.m., for that 3.5 hour block of time, whoever this person was, whether Mr. Cobain or someone else, their whereabouts were unaccounted for. The fact that Mr. Cobain had a receipt in his pocket, like I said, with the receipt for the firearm, knowing where he bought it, he could have just went back to the same place that he bought it at Stan Baker Sports, which was at the time located at 10,000 Lake City Way Northeast in Seattle. So why didn't they actually drive past there and end up buying shells at Seattle Guns? And why were there notes in Mr. Cobain's pocket with Seattle Guns and the address and what type of ammunition to buy? Mr. Cobain would have known those things. He could have just taken the receipt back to where he bought the gun and said, I bought this gun here. I need some more shells for it. And the attendant would have gladly sold him more shells. It wouldn't have been uncommon for someone to come in and buy another box of shotgun shells 3 days after the original purchase. People go out and shoot targets or whatever. So it seems odd to us that he had a receipt in one pocket for the gun store where the gun was bought, and yet notes in the other pocket for a totally different store with the particulars of what to get. These notes almost seem like the kind of thing you'd give to somebody else if you were going to give them a shopping list and say, I need you to go to this place and get this thing. If it were something they weren't familiar with. Of course, we don't know who was in the taxi that was picked up. It doesn't say anywhere if a photo lineup was ever given to this person to identify Mr. Cobain or any other person. So we really have no idea. It was one of the things that just seemed strange to us. As a matter of fact, I made a note in my case notes. I made the note here. Why would he need these notes if he had the sales receipt? In my mind, he wouldn't have. I mean, it's not a definitive proof of anything, yet it just makes one wonder who was actually in that cab. Was it Mr. Cobain or was it somebody else? I'm sure that the Druid is going to have some more thoughts on this, and we're going to have some other details on some movements and some other taxis that had went to Mr. Cobain's house. But for now, I'm going to leave you with this, and this is the LighterSeeker signing off.